Good morning and welcome to our first session of Unit 3, Appreciation for a System of the IQI Academy for Leadership Fundamentals. This is exciting because we're here to learn, to have fun, and to make a difference. I see as people work on their projects, you're beginning to do that. I appreciate the good work you're doing and the effort you're putting into learning and applying what you're learning through your project and your Teach to Learn conversations. As a reminder or an update, we've set our learning goals, 3 basic questions. We've been on the court through our PDSA cycles. We've done Teach to Learn conversations. The intention is with 5 or more different people each unit. That counter starts over again, so you can start with the same 5 people you've talked to before for this unit. And we've developed a deeper perspective on theory of knowledge through our theory of knowledge mind maps. Today, we're going to refine our 3 basic questions. I just sent out an email with the files that you might want to use this morning. One of them you will for sure use is the 3 basic questions one, just in case you haven't logged into the learning platform to download the file. And of course, we'll be beginning our next PDSA cycle test. Any comments on what you've worked on so far, especially as you submitted feedback for the previous units?
Hard for me to say since I've, been absent for quite some time.
Yeah. The interesting thing is, what do you remember from the last time you were here?
We were just starting to talk about the voice of the customer. So we're talking about who the customers were. So I was saying how I feel like both employees and residents and families are customers. And I was talking to you about how one of the people I did my Teach to Learn with didn't feel employees are customers, which really, I struggle with that. So anyway, that's the last thing I can remember.
I got it. One of the exercises we did in regards to that is the chain of customers exercise. I think you were gone when we began that one. And you could pick a service or product that you deliver, and clearly you could show, I do this particular thing, I give it to this group or set of people, and easily could be customers, and they have a job to be done with some of the things that they depend on you for. Could be budgets, could be policies, could be, standard operating procedures. It could be a variety of things that show up as, in order for them to do their work, they need something that you provide them. So easily you could demonstrate a customer-supplier relationship in those instances. So when you get to that, we can refresh that too, because that'll be a useful exercise for you to go through.
Okay.
Heidi, you mentioned some interesting things in your feedback for the unit that we just completed.
Yeah, I think it's been going well. It's not 100% yet, but I'm still waiting for the menu board to arrive in the mail to the actual one that we would like to have.
I think it's fascinating that even without a fancy board, you've been learning a lot about that entire process as people come and go, they visualize it, what do they see, what are they looking for, those kind of things. So you've learned a lot without having to spend really any money initially. So that's a good example of how we ought to be prototyping the work that we're doing. Morning, Rayanne. I see Rayanne. I'm not sure we hear her yet.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, good. So today, pull up your forms. We're going to be talking about what we're entering on our 3 basic question forms. I'm going to give you a couple examples here, and then some time to draft this form or draft your responses to this. So when we are answering the question, what are we trying to accomplish? This is really a description of your aim, your goal, or the end state And it doesn't include how you get there. So for instance, Denise, was one of your locations was Jamaica, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so you described Jamaica, not the process of flying to Florida, getting on the ship, disembarking from the ship, none of that. You describe, here's where I want to be. In fact, there might be, it's funny that I've got this visual here. It might be that you've got some version of, I'd like to have, the sun is shining, there's a perfect breeze here. I'm going to move over to this slide, this side. There's a perfect breeze here. It's just the right temperature, those kind of things. That's a description of where you want to be, not how you get there. So that's an element of how we want to phrase our responses to the three basic questions. Or we might say, hey, as far as food goes, I want to be eating the best meals of my life, the best seafood, fresh, picked this morning, delicious. Those kind of elements to our responses. Now, in the workplace, we might have things such as seamless workflows, optimized efficiency, smooth execution. Sounds like we found the secret to making work easy and effective. Now, this is very broad and high level. You're going to want, for your project, something more smaller scale. However, the element is a description of the thing we're focused on is not how we get there, but what it looks like when we've arrived. Or we might have something like a place where ideas flourish. We have, and it drives meaningful progress. We test, learn, and improve constantly. It's like a playground for problem solvers, and so on. There's a version of customers are delighted, sharing their excitement and appreciation for an exceptional experience. Yeah, I love that picture. I'll show that one again. That's good. Yeah. And then we also might have teams collaborate, handoffs are seamless, and work moves like clockwork. So there's that flavor of the response. None of those things have how we got there or what we did to get there. So the method shows up in our responses to question number 3. Those are moves to improve sort of things. So on our form, we'll be using, the form is in our Teach to Learn exercises section of 301 on the learning management system. However, I did mail it to you. And then this is the form you'll be filling out and turning in today. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to begin to draft a response to this first question. Then we'll talk more about the other questions. So please, and update this. Don't cut and paste. Don't copy. Pretend this is brand new. And you've learned some things now. You can refocus. You can scale it differently. Spend some time on what are we trying to accomplish?
For some reason, I can't hear you anymore.
I'm sorry. I had my mic on mute. Now you can hear me, correct?
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, so begin this as if it's new. Don't cut and paste from your previous responses. And then follow the guidance for answering each of the 3 basic questions. Eliminate off-limits words, especially when we get to question number 2. Generate at least 7 ideas for moves to improve that you could test. That's when we get to unit question number 3. And then, of course, this. So we're focused right now on the first couple bullets here, responding to question number 1. What are we trying to accomplish? If you've got something drafted, please share that in the chat. Cut and paste it. Okay, seamless workflow within housekeeping with well-defined expectations of each role. So as you write that, Denise, you can start thinking about answers to question number 2. How would I know a change is an improvement? What would I look for to observe that? And
I think
that's
I had. No, that's okay. I was basically trying to rework my initial thing with your ideas as far as what is the end game goal versus kind of some vagueness in my original one. So yeah, the measurable part's going to be the difficult part.
yeah, that's the challenge, isn't it? It's easy to communicate some things and then have an expectation, but then it's not clear enough. So it's like we're writing a version of the operational definitions we learned about with our animal crackers. Heidi, I wrote things differently this time to say developing an eye-catching menu board that residents will be able to read in the dining room. Doesn't matter if it's accurate, right? Yeah. Steak and lobster. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Who cares what's actually on the plate? Brianne and Danny, if you can, please turn on your cameras. I know sometimes it's a challenge in our situation. Thank you. And do we have responses from that you can share, Brianne or Danny?
I put some of the top goals are to improve residents' quality of life by improving quality of care and providing residents to have choices. And so I put for number 2 that to review the quality measures, the star rating, and residents' opinions. And I'm just starting on part 3 right now.
Yeah. So please paste in what you wrote for answer to question number 1. And remember, we're not using how-to language in our question number 1. How we do things, what moves we want to make will be things we test coming out of our question number 3 responses. Let's move on to question number 2 guidance. How you know that a change is an improvement. So this is our focus on what we're measuring, what we're observing, and interpreting from our situation. Essentially, what we're looking at is if we move away from our current state and anywhere closer to our desired end state, that's an improvement. So that's a version of how do we tell we're making progress toward any one of those things. So for instance, how do we tell we're making progress with seamless workflow? Or how do we know that our expectations are defined? You know, those are challenging because those are broad kind of questions that we're looking for. That's our objectives we're trying to achieve. Now, another perspective on Q number 2 responses is we're actually there. We've arrived. We've accomplished our goal. And so what's it look like at the end? So either one, we're getting closer. That means we've changed from our current state to something not yet at our end state, but still closer than we are today. Or we're there. So Denise, your travel to Jamaica could have been, I'm X thousand miles away from Jamaica. I want to be in Jamaica. Progress would include, I'm half, like I've traveled 500 miles towards Jamaica. I'm making progress. So that's one way of telling I'm getting closer. So in this one, we're looking for responses to question number 2. How will we know a change in the improvement? And in our question number 2 responses, we're looking for answers. Let's see, here we go. I'll do this one. That avoid our off-limits words. So remember, we had our off-limits words exercise in Unit 1. And these are things that really don't communicate meaning. We learned more about that with our exercise with the animal crackers. We're looking for words that are much more a method of measuring things that we can observe what we're looking for. How do we tell? And with your initial pass at your responses today, you might want to include just 1 or 2 measures of this looks like improvement. This is how I know we're making improvement. So Denise, one of the things that might arise out of well-defined expectations is what are the numbers of questions people have, or what's the number of actions or responsibilities that are left done or that are left undone each day. Some version of how do I know that people know what their role is, and can I somehow measure that? Or there might be in your conversations, maybe there's fewer complaints about how things are set up. So there's a variety of different ways you can get at what are we looking for here. It might be that seamless workflow means, there's no question about when people show up, what they're taking on and what they do. They just clock in, get dressed, change for the day. They pull out their materials that they need, take their carts, and they're off and running. Maybe there's no back and forth between their carts and supplies. They've been well stocked from the previous shift, on and on. So you can have a variety of things that show up like that. As you come up with responses to question number 2, please add those to the chat. So look at your off-limits words and see if there's any of those off-limits words that show up in your responses. I'll show those on the screen again.
Have some on how to at the end, how to change that. Let's see.
I have a question. On the screen I'm sharing, do you see the chat interface?
Yes.
You do, okay. So it's blocking what I have there. So for instance, Denise, when you're looking for complete, one of the things you look for is, well, how many things do we have? If I have 10 items, are all 10 followed? So there's some version of that. So be specific.
Joe, because we had a meeting like the day before I left and developed the standard operating procedure with the housekeeping team, and they were to provide him some feedback while I was gone. So I don't know what the number is, because I can change it once he gets back and I see what that number is, because I don't know if it's ended where we had initially developed it, so yeah. I just changed it a little bit to just at least be this way, because I don't really need the word completed and documented. The operating procedure says what those things are. So, but I can get the number hopefully when he's back tomorrow.
And then if you begin doing a daily record of these things are complete, you get to see on an ongoing basis how many items are completed each day out of the total. Obviously, you're going towards the total, but when we get to see, is there anything that's happening that's standard? Like, are we always missing 2 or 3? So what's happening there? That's part of that would be a system kind of common cause issue. Versus, do we have a spike one day and that was a special cause, and maybe that was something we need to chase or something that's never going to happen again. But beginning to collect data on this on a regular basis will be helpful also. So one of the things you can think of is, what are the things I can count, observe, record, keep track of while we're doing this? Heidi, Rayanne, and Frank, and Danny, do you have things to share here?
You mean about number 2?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I can type it in. It's really not too much different.
Rayanne, when we write evaluate resident responses, quality measures, and star rating, so that's a description of a measurement process, but it's what you want with your response to question number 2 is, what is the measure we'll be getting? So when you say evaluate resident opinions, you want to say, this is their opinion about this thing, and here's the quality measure we're using, rather than we're taking a quality measure. So these should be more specific. Otherwise, we can't tell what's happening here as far as, can we look at something in the environment and say, yeah, we're achieving that. If we evaluate resident opinions, does that mean they're better, worse, those kind of things? So those are areas where we want to be more specific.
Okay.
Let's move on. So question number 3, what moves can we test that will cause improvement? Our form has at least 7 places where we can put things. And there's a variety of things that we could actually move. Move the order or sequence we do things in. Move how many we're using of whatever that thing is. Move the timing, the when, the frequency. Move authority and permission. That's a big one sometimes. Who can make decisions? Move what department or what person is doing something. For instance, Denise, having the distribution of work be fair, that might be a move of some sort. Move what's visible. So clearly, Heidi, that's one of the things you're working on. How do we make some things more visible or not visible? Move where we perform things or where we store things. And move what? Maybe change our policies, take a policy in or out, those kind of things. So there's all sorts of different things that we could consider moving that we think could produce improvement. So remember here, these are intended to be incremental, not get me all the way from where I am to the end. But what's a beginning? It might be change one thing one day, and I can test that and see what's happened. Heidi, you were doing that in a big sense with changing just font size one day, changing location. Maybe I added a location. Now you're in both entrance areas. Those sort of things. Like, okay, you've done incremental improvements. And so you did you changed where, right? You changed what's visible. So those are all moves that you tested on a small scale. You also included who you had input from more people than just what you expected originally, I think.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't expect the nurse aides to quite get involved as they did.
Right. And, it might be eventually they take over ownership or some version of who owns this. Now, there's also a when that showed up as you ran into a when situation of when something gets changed on the menu on what's going to get served. How do we communicate that? Like, there's a thing to test there. Because you might have a menu plan that says for tomorrow, I've got my menu set up and it's there. And then the kitchen staff says, oh, we don't have those ingredients. We're serving something else, like that. Mm-hmm. So how does that, what kind of test could you do for that to make sure that your menu stays accurate and updated? So what are some things that you could move for your project?
I could make a placemat of the menu in front of each person on the table. I could do that. We haven't done anything like that yet. Or I
kind of like those fancy restaurants that update their offering every. I mean, it's printed every day, brand new. Here's what we're serving today, sort of thing, right? So right. You could run something off the printer and then zoom out. Yep. So yeah, it could turn into a placemat if we're using paper placemats, or even you could have a slider of some. All right, I'm going too far, but yeah, you could have some version of updated menus already. So that would be a move you could test. Yeah.
I thought about a different color. The first color I tested was yellow around the border. And this week I thought about pink because it's Valentine's Day, and which one would they see better?
I got it. So there's elements on the menu that you could also color code. So it could be that now you've got a standard color for each element of the menu. Like here's your main course is one color, your dessert's another color. I mean, you could try those kind of things too.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So you create some kind of standard for, and people get used to looking for, oh, that's the, I want to look for, what do I get for dessert today? And they know the color sort of thing.
What about a picture? Because sometimes people don't realize what they're eating. So if you have peach cobbler, maybe have a, picture of a peach or maybe, of the dish itself and mark it, you know, so that they
Yeah,
know what they're
kind of
eating.
like what,
Sometimes tests are like that.
like a Denny's menu or something that has pictures of everything on it. Yep.
Yeah, that's an idea. That's going to take a little more time.
Well, what's interesting with
Heidi, I
that,
just love your theme. I just think that's
Yeah.
so neat
yeah.
what you're doing.
And once you've got a set of pictures that are going to be standard. Like you're not going to have infinite number of variety of foods that you're going to be serving, right? So you could just go to your file cabinet of today's picture, like you could certainly swap things in and out as the menus change, like
Yeah, we have a 5-week cycle menu and we try to serve, something different almost at every meal. So,
yeah.
yeah.
But in that 5 weeks, you repeat the 5 weeks. So it's not like you're creating something new every single time. You have to generate new pictures every time. So if you decided to try pictures, you could know that eventually I'll have my stock of pictures and it'll just be from my file. It's not something I have to make up every time I put up a menu.
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes your supplier can provide those pictures because that they have to advertise as well as what, this is what we're saying that, you can create with our ingredients. So they can have a picture too for you.
All right, so for our other projects, what are moves we can test? Please add an idea or two. And don't give yourself permission to give up on 7. I've had Academy participants that give me a list of 21 different things they could try when they realize here's a level at which I can begin to test things. They're not trying to change, boil the ocean kind of thing. They're saying, okay, I can move this one thing this one day and test it. So what are things you could move to and provide a test that you can learn from? So the source of our PDSA cycles are our answers to question number 3. Question number 3 isn't the PDSA cycle, but it's things of learning, does this work? So what can I try here that I can learn something about and say, oh, that's going to get me, if I change what's visible, for instance, if I change the border, does that help me have residents know better what's on the menu? If I change the location, that's another one where, oh yes, I really could have more residents know what's on the menu. And that was something we learned right away, I think. So what are things we can learn that allow us to see things like the work is being followed? What can I test and move? Where does it have to show up for work to be followed? So standard operating procedures aren't always valuable on the computer, right? So where do they need to be seen, observed, integrated into the workplace? Denise, many of these things that are listed here could show up in a way that you alter elements of your standard operating procedure. A sequence might be how many people are doing some things, how frequently they're doing some things, who's doing it. Those are all elements of standard operating procedure that you could alter and test in some fashion. So you could pick one element of whatever that work is and say, we want to test it this way. Or we want to test it, instead of doing it every other day, we want to try doing it daily, see what happens. Some version of that. Or vice versa. Maybe it doesn't need to be done daily. Heidi, what are some of your next moves? You've got this with no change improvement when residents with tell food. So what is it? So what would you be moving?
Well, I named 7 so far, and then I was going to pick which one, or maybe.
Yeah, maybe just read one or two that you've got.
Well, adding the bright color on the outer sides of the weekly menu, the pink. Placing a weekly menu in the middle of each table in the dining room. Announcing the menu over the inner. And then, like I had said, making a placemat on the table. Another thing is I could lower the larger font menu even down further on the board and see if that makes a difference. And then you had mentioned creating different colors of font for each of the food items listed on the menu, and then the making pictures of the food items and displaying them.
Okay, those are all good examples of moves you could test. You can evaluate that, and you've got a method already. You can randomly sample residents and say what's on your plate, basically, right? Is that, or do you know what's on your plate, right?
Yeah. What are you there today?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So that's question number 3, responses. And of course, today's assignment is submit your new 3 basic questions form, complete it, and be sure to eliminate as many off-limits words as possible from your responses. So pull up your off-limits words list from Unit 1 and refer to that and evaluate it and then update it. So here's our assignments. They're simple. Today's Teach to Learn conversation will be about refining the 3 basic questions. Here's one part of your conversation you can have is, where else should we be asking our 3 basic questions? One first place you should always ask yourself the 3 basic questions is, every meeting that you're in, have we answered, what are we trying to accomplish with this meeting? How do we know we've accomplished it? And is there ways to accomplish this better? So that's one thing that we see frequently. In fact, I had a senior executive take on the regular weekly senior meeting that he had at his organization and did a week by week improvement of just working on the agenda for one of his key meetings by addressing the 3 basic questions in his meetings. You'll turn in your 3 basic question form and your plan for your PDSA cycle for this week. So you're going to take at least one of the ideas you have for moves to improve to test and turn that into a PDSA for the week. Or for the next day, you might run 2 or 3 PDSAs potentially. And of course, what's a test I can run and learn from today is one of the questions we want to continue to ask in your 3 basic questions. Here's our theory of knowledge quotes for mind mapping. We'll be updating our mind maps. Some of you are getting pretty squeezed on your current format. You might have to update your mind map or the format or refresh it. So this is from Garrett Reisman. He was an astronaut and a senior advisor at SpaceX. He says there's a natural human tendency to clamp down on change out of fear. But some of our biggest failures occurred because we didn't make a change. And then Catherine Helen O'Neill is an American mathematician and data scientist, and she wrote the book Weapons of Math Destruction. And she described a variety of issues with algorithms that are out there. Like, guys, these mathematical models were opaque. Their workings invisible to all but the highest priests in their domain. Their verdicts, even when wrong or harmful, were beyond dispute or appeal, and we tended to punish the poor and the oppressed in our society while making the rich richer. So she's describing these models, which are basically predictions about how things ought to be handled and algorithms we should be following. And she said many of our models encode our prejudices, our misunderstandings, our biases. So that's a fascinating approach to looking at what versions of standard work could do to us if we don't have a chance to question it and update it. So thank you very much for your good work today. It's always challenging to refresh on what is it we're trying to accomplish and how do we know, especially how do we know a change is improvement is one of the key things to look at. Please be in communication if you have questions. Thank you again, and I will see you tomorrow.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.